everyone, real quick, if you're interested in booking private lessons with me, you can contact me through my website at breenmusiclessons.com, link in the description and the pinned comment. All right, so let's talk about some ways you can play over a common blues progression. Now, the most obvious thing that people think to go for is either the minor pentatonic or the blues scale. But what I'm going to show you is that those two options are okay, but there's more interesting ways you can use certain scales and certain arpeggios to play over top of a blues progression. So the first thing is a blues progression typically is going to have a bunch of dominant chords in them. So as a disclaimer, this is not minor blues. So sometimes with like a B.B. King style blues jam, you're going to encounter a bunch of minor seventh chords. That's a different discussion, which I'll probably make a separate video for in the future. So for right now, I'm just talking about dominant blues or major blues, if you want to think about it that way. So A7s, D7s, and E7s, if I'm playing in A blues. So this is the 1 chord. This would be the 4 chord. And this would be the 5 chord. So what you typically hear is the 1 chord and the 4 chord, and they're bouncing around back and forth. And then eventually you get to the turnaround, which is the 5 chord, going to the 4, and then ultimately resolving back to the 1 chord, something like this. So typically the 12-bar blues would be longer than that and more drawn out, so that's just kind of a concise version of it. So I have a loop of that chord progression set up, and I'm going to play over top of it in the most basic way that you would start out. Minor pentatonic and minor blues scale. Let's see what this sounds like. Okay, not bad for a start. You can probably get a lot of mileage out of that. But there's some interesting things when you hear a bunch of dominant chords. They all have elements of major sounds in them. So every dominant chord has a major triad inside it, a root, a major third, and a perfect fifth. Although sometimes that perfect fifth can be changed if you're talking about altered dominant chords, but we're not in this lesson. That's a separate discussion. So because of that, you're getting a lot of potential for using major sounds. So the one thing you can do because of these major triads is that you can mix an A major pentatonic in this case with an A minor pentatonic. So parallel key changes. Let's see what it sounds like. So that was an example of me taking position 1 of minor pentatonic off of A, and then also contrasting that with position 1 of minor pentatonic in F sharp. So that would give me that sound of an A major, because F sharp minor is the relative key for A major. If you don't understand that concept, it's okay, but that's one shortcut that you can use. You don't necessarily have to completely understand the concept in order to use it properly. So basically that's the easiest way. If you only know position 1 of your minor pentatonic, you can do that position 1 off the 5th fret and then position 1 off the 2nd fret and mix and match them, and you're getting that major and minor sound. Another way to do it is if you want to stay in the same position on the fretboard, you can knock back and forth between position 1 in A and position 2 of minor pentatonic in A. So a third way that you can do it is what they call playing over the changes. You're going to try to change when the chord changes by playing some arpeggios, which are the notes from the chord. So these are what the arpeggio shapes would look like. This is an A7 arpeggio shape. This is a D7 arpeggio shape. This is an E7 arpeggio shape. So the same basic pattern, you're just moving them around and you're changing them based on when the chord changes. So you could do some other things to decorate it, but let's start with this idea. So that's a more interesting sound. You can combine that with the major and the minor mixing and then get some interesting results that way. The last thing I want to talk about in today's lesson is building off of that concept, using the arpeggios, but dressing it up a little bit. Maybe using some intervals that are not there originally, but that you can use as passing tones. So let's use the sixth interval. The sixth interval is very, very usable. It's very close to one of the chord tones. It's only a half a step away from the minor 7, which is what you get in dominant chords. So let's see what it sounds like to use the sixth interval as a passing tone to get us to that minor 7th ultimately. See what it sounds like on all of them. So what I can do now is I can go into the upper octave and still find that same push and pull. I can find the major sixth interval in the higher octave and still slide or even bend a half step up to the minor 7th. Here's what it sounds like with a bend on that last sixth interval. So let's do something a little different on the D7 and the E7 because of how the strings are laid out in the tuning. The B and the G string are kind of oriented differently. So what I see that's easier to hit and closer to me is actually doing a cool little bend from the minor third interval, which is not originally in the chord, but it's a nice tension note, bending into the major third, which is the proper note for that arpeggio. I could do that for the E7 as well. And then as a final little touch, I want to add the fifth interval, which I can easily find on the high E string of both of those positions. Has a cool kind of country twang to it as well. Let's see what this stuff sounds like over top of the original loop. All right, so those are the three main ways that you can play over a blues progression. And obviously the best way is to try to combine all of these elements, but I wanted to highlight as a way to practice for you to work your way up. Start with the basic idea. There's nothing wrong with just using the minor pentatonic and the minor blues scale initially off of A, but then slowly try to ease yourself into mixing the major and minor sounds, and then try to get to the point where you can play over the chord changes. That's going to be the most difficult at first, because you also, while you're doing the pattern recognition and trying to remember what to do, you have to lend your ear and say, all right, I can tell when the chord is changing. And you have to recalibrate as it's happening in real time. So obviously that's not easy, but that's something you want to build up to. And like I said, all this stuff is going to make you sound much more musical when you try to do these kind of things.